Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. Okay, whoever's got an open mic is fired. So anyway, welcome to Office Hours. Someone had an open mic at the beginning there. Anyway, so if you are wondering what's going on, you can go to YouTube and not YouTube, but you can go to officehours.global. We general discussion for the first hour. Second hour is things we'd like to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about Office Hours 2.0 and what's changing, what we're learning, how we're figuring it out. So we'll be putting that together. Andy Carluccio will be joining us to talk about the dev background, and we'll talk about just the flow and what we're learning. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how to get the most out of office hours. We're a bit mysterious, a mysterious bunch. So about every once in a while, we break back up and say, okay, here's how you get the most out of this. And so we're going to talk about that on Friday. Saturday is the long day. We have education at 8 o'clock. It's a 2-hour discussion, and it's just fantastic about education, everything from K through 12 to corporate education and so on and so forth, and all the trials and tribulations and ideas. It's a real brainstorming session, but we don't put it on YouTube, so you have to be in the Zoom session for that. And then at noon, we're going to go to Todd Reynolds' house using the Belfast method and do a remote takeover of Todd Reynolds' house and stream to YouTube, and you get to listen to the comms and watch how it works, and that all goes out in the email. Quick announcement, on Sunday, we're going to try a new time for our cooking. So Sunday at 9 o'clock, right after the Q&A, and I mean right after the Q&A, Hosmukh's taking time off, Damayanti's taking time off, but Ken Jordan's available. So we're going to make a nut bread, a paleo bread with Ken Jordan and Shannon and everything else. So it should be a lot of fun. So that's going to be at 9 o'clock on Sunday. We're trying a new time that will hopefully make it a little easier for a variety of things. Number one is it opens up more time for the Belfast method stuff, as well as it creates time that I can take my daughter to the farmer's market, which was the tradition pre-COVID that she would like back. So anyway, so that's where we're going to kind of move things around. All right, let's jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Good morning, one and all. Alfredo, looks like Tigulo in Inglewood, California, has our first question. He says, how does one learn to become a production leader?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Apprentice. Become a production assistant first and follow someone who is a good production leader. And I'm not sure what you mean by production leader, but perhaps a director or producer or production organizer. So shadow somebody who does it and watch what they do, and you'll eventually learn it and perhaps make enough contacts through that position to be offered that position in the future when that producer is unavailable.
Lois?
Well, I think with production, as in almost every job that you hold, the first thing is to know the job. So if you are producing a particular kind of thing, learn all about it that you can, and be open to understanding all the variations of it. Because when people start asking you questions, then you are de facto a leader. And I have a feeling that the question is more about being a team leader than being promoted to producer. So I would say be part of the team.
Yeah. Bill?
The best definition of leadership I ever heard was one of the CEOs I worked with in the middle of my career, and he defined it as achieving results through the efforts of others. And when I thought about that for a while after he said it, it really stuck with me for a few days. And I realized that if you're not doing it, you have to give up the control to make sure that others do it. And that means you're constantly motivating and empowering, assigning resources. Those are all the things that leaders do, but you cannot do it yourself, even if all of your instincts say, it would be so much easier if I just fixed this. That is the death of leadership.
Go ahead, Rupert.
And just to Courtney's point about apprenticeships, excuse me, I'm a full supporter of apprenticeships. I did electrical apprenticeship. I know it's not exactly related to the question, but in learning from others, in let's say an apprenticeship type situation, it's important to learn from others, but also experience a range of different examples, because you may find that not everybody you learn from is the best example to learn from.
I'm sorry, that's good. That's such a nice way of saying it. So anyway, I often think about fail small, fail often. You want to be in a place, you want to find yourself in the beginning in a place where you can actually fail often without it becoming a huge issue. What people get into is they start bidding on jobs they can't do, and then they get too deep into it, and you end up causing a lot of damage. And so being around other production, I mean, the big thing is you want to be doing it. Find any way that you can do it. Volunteer, jump on teams for very little money, then work your way up, and try to figure out how to make it work. Find ways that you can just get practical knowledge. Practical knowledge is 10 times more valuable than theoretical knowledge. All the books you read aren't going to help you. I mean, they're good when you're doing it to fill in the gaps of what you don't understand. They're not particularly useful just to read them before you've done anything, because you haven't had any experience there yet. Surround yourself with people that know more than you. That's what we do here. Everybody here knows something about what they know more than us, which is what we benefit from. But try to find teams that you can be part of that, and you can ask them questions and just listen to the conversation. Listen to in production. I love listening to comms. I love watching shows and just listening to comms and listening to all the things that are happening and all the, and it's just, I get every once in a while, I get an opportunity to listen to broadcasts and see the truck feeds and listen to the broadcast. And it's like a master's course. So find ways that you can get around that, and don't be impatient. Like it took most of us years to move up. So there's this thing like, I'm going to do a couple shows, and now I'm going to start running my own shows. So it's a risky way to go if those shows get to be big. So really look for small shows at the beginning that you can manage, and that you can work through, and then time. Give yourself a lot of time when you do productions. Give yourself time to be on time. Give yourself time to get things done. Give yourself, time is this thing that almost everything takes 4 times longer than you think. So calculate what it's going to take, and then multiply it by 4, and then suddenly everything works out. All right, next question.
Ray Hardward's up next from Avondale in Arizona, and Ray asks, how many Zoom panelist logins does it take to host office hours? Not including the on-screen Q&A folks. How many actual humans are behind the scenes, and how many bots, meters, ZoomISO OSCs, and so forth?
Go ahead, Jason.
All right, I'll take a stab at this. Ray, the answer might surprise you. I would say it's between 2 and, at the moment, 129, because, of course, without having questions and having people to vote on questions, all the rest of it is just kind of nothing. It's worthless. Right. The other 2, of course, would be, technically one person could run all the meters, and then somebody switching the show. Also, of course, we're also switching 2.0. So, yeah. And
we expect it to get bigger. I mean, I expect that as we go into Office Hours 2.0 and people step up and volunteer to become part of different teams, on any given day, I think that by the middle of next year, any given day, there'll be 50 or 60 people working on it. Because it's an incredible both networking and learning experience for everybody to be part of. So I think that we'll end up with a lot more people involved. Next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury in the UK says, what is the quickest way to change your display name in Zoom so that you can quickly switch between a name used on calls with friends and one used outside the office hours community?
Go ahead, George.
So I use Text Expander. I'm not going to try to dig in deep into it, but you can see right here, there's all my office hour cues. So Text Expander allows you to put in text, and it's just like you can make any shortcuts. So when I come in office hours, I could plug in that, just a few clicks, and it just puts in the number or the names in it. So that's what I use. Easiest way.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, very similar. I keep the names I use regularly in a notepad document, and just get copy the one I want right before I'm ready to join the meeting I want. And the quickest way to do it in Zoom, there may be a keyboard shortcut for it in Zoom, I'm not sure, but you can right click on yourself in gallery view or your own participant and just go to rename and then just paste it in.
Go ahead, Lois.
Well, similar to Rupert, but I have a Mac, so I use stickies, and I have all of the Zoom meetings and passwords stuck up there, and also the names that I want to use, copy and paste.
Jason?
I'm going to combine at least 2 of the answers and say I use Text Expander to expand the text snippet, and I have rename mapped to one of the superfluous keys on the Mac keyboard, in my case F18. So it's F18 to rename, and then I just text expand whatever I need.
I use a very high-tech method to make this all work. I never change my name. Like I only type it in here when I have to for this, and I just change it when I log in. It's just kind of a method but I don't have an inside name and an outside name, or an inside way of being or outside way of being. I find that all of that is just too complicated. It's too hard for me to process. So that's my approach. Next question.
Comes from Simon Rez in Shrewsbury in the UK. And Simon asks, is anyone on the panel aware of a single virtual camera for the Mac that just outputs a configurable static image, or preferably the view of a window or screen, without all the memory processor load of OBS and the like?
Go ahead, John.
You didn't say whether you're on PC or Mac, but I'll just tell you the two other apps. OBS can take a lot of CPU. The two other ones to look at are NDI. They call it Screen Cap on PC. On the Mac, they call it Scan Converter. And then Sienna. Sienna also has tools for Screen Cap that are pretty lightweight.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So we were talking about this earlier. If you get yourself a Mevo Start has the ability to do NDI through the camera. It's got a 6-hour battery, so you could point that right at the window. Use NDI, which is free tools that you can download, as John said, and then bring that into Zoom. There is another way. If you have a web security camera that can do RTSP, you can then use VLC to bring in the RTSP and then bring that into Zoom from there.
Go ahead, Rupert.
That's not how I'm reading the question. I'm interpreting it as needing a virtual camera input that shows nothing but a static image. That's what I'm reading from that.
Yeah. There's a variety of little, there's been a bunch of them that have been there. I mean, I have to admit that all I've used for the last couple of years is Mimo Live to do that, which is probably similar to OBS. I think actually a little less than OBS on the Mac. So I don't have a lot of ways to insert it outside of that, because the problem is that I have that, right? The easiest virtual camera is a Atem. So go ahead, Felipe.
Well, on the Mac, you have Ecamm Live, which uses
Ecamm Live is
metal, and it's going to be pretty light.
Yeah, Rupert.
I think I've just thought of a way. You can use OBS, but you don't have to run it. If you install OBS, it will install the virtual camera driver, and then you can dig through the file system and replace the placeholder image with whatever you want. You can then load up the virtual cam without starting OBS, and because OBS isn't started, the virtual cam driver will be outputting the default image. But if you ever update OBS, it will overwrite that image. So you need to go back. If you do an update, you need to go back through the file system and put back in your image.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael wonders, what brand of NAS, network attached storage unit, have you had the most success with for a small studio?
I'm so glad. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just say this, I have seen the least time wasted with Synologies.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Jason?
Yep, I think this one might be universal. I've seen the least time wasted with Synologies. They're also extremely flexible and very easy to deploy.
Good, Michael.
Yes, I'm using the Synology too, and enterprise level hard drives. The duty rating is 24/7, 365. So I highly recommend the enterprise level hard drive.
Good, Doug.
So I have 4 different types of NAS, and I agree with those guys ahead of me that the Synology is an easy one. But if you do want to step up to a bigger one, that I have the 45 drives, and I'm going to get rid of my old ones and just get another 45 drives because I can work directly off that. It's so fast.
I was gonna, when you didn't have your hand up at first, that I was just gonna throw a hard pass to Doug no matter what. I was gonna. So what do you think, Doug? You know, because Doug's got more different ones than the rest of us. Go ahead, Felipe.
45 hard drives. Most studios don't have that much Ethernet.
No, it's just called 45
amazing.
drives. It's just the brand. It's the brand. It's called 45 drives. It's less drives. Go ahead.
Well, mine can hold 30.
Okay, yeah, but not 45. But not 45.
Well, you know, maybe the next one.
Go ahead, Felipe.
Well, I use both Synology and QNAP, and recently moved my QNAP to a data center. I agree with everyone. Synology is probably the easiest, but it doesn't have M.2 and 10 gig in the same box. You can either have one or the other. So then the QNAP, you could have your drives, your RAID, plus M2 caching, plus 10 gig, or Thunderbolt 3 connection. Right. So I tend to go direction of QNAP for performance and Synology for ease to use and Synology drive.
It's great. Next question.
We need a public relations campaign to have LTW, least time wasted, as an actual metric they
LTW.
publish. That would be
Yeah, the
fabulous.
LTW. Yeah, that is a good one. We have to keep that. The LTW score is 8.
8.7.
Yeah. All right, go ahead. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, I read about production crews deploying Discord as a cost-effective communication solution. What issues would come into play using Discord versus a production-centric communication solution like Unity?
Go ahead, John.
Round peg, square hole. Chris and I tried it last year, and it didn't work well compared to Unity. One of the most useful things on Unity, it shows you the list of who spoke last, and that's super useful in the middle of a production. So it's night and day, two different worlds.
Go ahead, Rupert.
And I think with Discord, you're going to have problems like monitoring different channels at different, levels, and having quick PTT access to different channels. If it's just like one channel on a common thing, then maybe. But I think for comms in production, you need something a bit more versatile.
On my first show that I had to do that was in multiple places, I talked to an audio engineer, and he said, "Well, I think we're going to need 4 PLs," and I was like, 4 PLs, party lines. It's like, how would we ever use 4 PLs? Like, why do we just not need one? I now design ones with 20 PLs. You just keep on adding them because you want to have different conversations with different people, and you don't want to distract people. As you get good at comms, you end up wanting point-to-points and PLs and all kinds of things for different things. And comms is like 50% of your show. So having it be like saving money there is, especially when Unity is not that expensive. Now I prefer, left to my own devices, I'll use ClearComm, but only when I can afford it. But Unity is great otherwise. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York's up next. He says, should I spend the money on a backdrop for behind my workstation seat that I'd have to collapse and move when I'm not on camera for a meeting, or just move my laptop with my mic camera to another spot in the room that has a perfect gray wall behind it?
Go ahead, Tim.
I think your key word there is workstation. When you have everything set up the way you like it, the backdrop is probably the simplest thing to set up and take down. And trying to redo that somewhere else all the time is you're going to lose all of your consistency, of your image. And if you're at one set station, you can really improve the way you look day to day.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Depending on your environment, if you could get a backdrop with a pull down arrangement, if you can get something attached to your ceiling, then that would be a real quick switch around.
Go ahead, Lois.
I think it depends on a lot on how much stuff you would have to move and how good your mobile setup is. If your microphone and camera are equal on the two, I would go for using the mobile, because in my case, this is my living room. And so if I have to set up and take down something, it takes about an hour, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think that one of the problems is that when you have to move things all the time, you won't evolve, your setup, because you have to, it lives in this little space. Like I have to move it all the time. I know that mine would be like in the office that I'm designing on Mondays with all of you, I'm building a whole desk that moves because I do want to change the background, but I don't want to, I want the main system to stay completely tied together because I want to keep adding to it, making it better. One thing to look at is something like this. This is a magnet setup that I got for the next build. And what this does is that this screen that sits behind me has a metal edge that, you fold up like a reflector for a car. It snaps to this piece. And so what you can do is just taking it down is just literally snapping this up and snapping it down. And once you learn to, as Bill taught us early on, to fold this like a taco, it's pretty easy to fold back up again. But if you don't fold it like a taco, there is a lot of swearing that goes on. That's not safe for our show.
Anyone who has Sky folding that. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So, but once you get it working, it's good. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm trying to rebuild something for Office Hours 2.0, and I wanted to go with a wider look because I've really enjoyed seeing people's spaces. So for me, it's lighting now. I want to have my office look normal for people, but I want to do a bunch of switches that I can just kick on, and suddenly I'm in Zoom presenter mode. So instead of going with backdrops and things like that are hard to mount, rest of that, for me, lighting is going to be the key to my new setup.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Bill stole my answer.
Next question.
Moving on, Tobias Moss comes up next, and he asks, if I needed to have a browser open while live streaming from the same machine, what browser should I use? Talking as a Windows user in his case.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to give you my suggestion, but I'm also going to give you an option that will show you the best option. In this case, I assume you want the most efficient browser, the most memory and CPU efficient browser. My guess is that Windows, although it's actually just a thread of Chrome, the default Windows browser is probably the best, but you can always just look at your resource monitor and take a look from there.
Good, Guy.
Yeah, I'd also take a look at the Brave browser. I use that on the Mac and on PC. It's pretty lightweight, especially if you open up those resource monitors and take a look at what Chrome does. It's a small percentage versus Chrome. So take a look at it. It's free.
Chrome is a beast. Next question.
Aaron Giancarlo of Flagstaff, Arizona is up next. He says, I need a new key light for field video production and wanted to see what the panel would recommend. What are your suggestions?
Go ahead, Jason.
Nobody thought my 45 drives joke was funny, so I'm going to be very serious here. Elgato is a great choice. I would start there.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Mainly for my key light, I use my light panel Astra softbox. It's a nice and very portable, low profile. And if you need just something to punch in on a remote, I used a LumiCube. Aperture has something like this too. They're small and very bright, so they'll do the job for you.
Go ahead, Bill.
It just depends. Field production is a big subject. So are you going to be doing interior office work? You need one level of light. If you're going outside and want to be able to kick somebody's face up against a sunny background, you need a lot more punch than that. I'd look at the aperture stuff, and I'd look at something that runs on batteries, but also can be plugged in when you really need the extra juice to kick in somebody's face and brighten them up.
Good, Guy.
Yeah, I'm using a P300 that I just switched over to with the softbox, and I'm using it at about 50%. This thing's got some serious brightness, but the nice thing is with the egg crate, you can really you can barely see it in this image, but it's off there to the left. With that egg crate on it, it really allows the soft light to be directional, which is helping with this right here. Some of you might have noticed before the show, I was trying to get this to be richer, and without that egg crate on there, this would just be all washed out. So that's the nice thing about a proper key light with the egg crate on it, is that you can get directional soft light with a large source. So this thing's pretty big. It's about 3 feet by 2 feet.
Yeah, the other ones that are really interesting are light pads. That's pretty much all we've used for most of our remote shoots for the last 2 years. So I use a lot of other things in the house. They roll up and they pop out onto a piece of cardboard, and we rent them a lot. They come in. A lot of our gaffers have been using them, and they're super light. They're an inch thick, and they're easy to transport. And so for that kind of field use, and again, a lot of them are like 4 feet by 4 feet. LED. They're basically flexible LED that is attached to and I just don't have a picture of it, but I'll see if I can find that later. But that's all we've used for remote stuff for the last 2 years, and it's been really successful. Next question.
Alfredo Tigolo of Inglewood, California. Next, does anyone know how to use LinkedIn Live with OBS specifically?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, with the OBS, you'll have to use the RTMP just like you would with Facebook. So basically what you would do is you'd go to LinkedIn, and then well, first of all, you have to get accepted to be on LinkedIn Live. And then once you have that, you go to the LinkedIn page to create your live stream. And when you create the live stream, you're going to get a URL and a unique key. You would then go over to OBS and then put that into the settings there. And then that'll allow you to stream into LinkedIn. The other way to do it is through a third party like Restream or StreamYard.
Sorry, I'm the wrong. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo here on the panel says, what are good standard verbal cues to give camera operators who are volunteers being trained? They have comms, but not any kind of multi-view to see what the shots look like.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, first thing is gather them together and learn the nomenclature of cameras, which is pan is horizontal movement, left and right. Tilt is up and down. And tighten up or pull back is zoom in and zoom out, so that you can give them commands like, tilt up or pan right, and they don't go, don't give them commands like tilt right or pan up. And so once they learn it, then the simple commands should be obvious what to do. And you can just tell them tighten up a little bit, means zoom in a little bit, and check your focus. Show them how to check their focus when they're not switched live so that they can zoom in, focus, and zoom back out again. Things like that. And get them all together so they all understand it so that you don't have to single anybody out for being a dummy, and they're volunteers.
Go ahead, George.
So Courtney covered most of the first part. I tend to use ready 1, ready 2, ready 3. If I need to really get a camera person's attention, I'll say camera 1, John, can you check focus? So I tend to just call ready 1, ready 2. If I need to really get their attention, I'll call up my name.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, before our shows, we always have a camera meeting. And I've actually gone and created a laminated picture of the camera. And all the cameras are the same. And I show them where the buttons are. Like, here's the white balance. Here's where the iris is. Here's where the focus is. And we just have that camera meeting, and I give them instructions on, all right, camera 1, you're going to do this. Camera 2, you're going to do this. And so I give them that instruction ahead of time. And then if we have time before a show, I get them on the cameras, and we kind of practice going through what we're doing. And so the meeting ahead of time is kind of crucial.
Go ahead, Lois.
Well, all of those folks said good things. And what I was going to say is to make sure that each person knows who they are, because if they're camera 1 week and the next week they're camera 2, sometimes they'll get confused. The other thing is, if you've got a team that's going to be coming back periodically, you can do a shoot where it is not going out at all. You're just doing it internally, and talk them through what's happening, and then afterwards show them what was accomplished so that they get a feel for how it looks when they've done this thing.
Yeah, it's a great suggestions. Yeah, I've set up teams that have had almost no camera experience in 4 hours and then gone into an event. And the big thing is all the things that everyone said here. Nose room is something that I explain to them what that means. Like, I need more nose room, because a lot of times the first thing a camera operator will do is center people. And so then I want more headroom or less headroom. Generally, I want less headroom. I'm a streaming director, not a TV director. So usually I'll be like, I need less headroom. Like, do not leave so much space above their head. So anyway, so those are the things that I also go into. To Lois's point, a lot of times we record rehearsals and then go over them. And then I explain like what worked and what didn't work. And then you just have to know that your edit will be slower as a TD. Don't be impatient with people. Just know that it's going to take them a little more time, and take the time. If you take the time as the TD to reframe and get them to frame it correctly, they'll learn how to frame it correctly rather than just going to them and cutting to them. You have to give them that feedback, and just know that if you're taking inexperienced camera operators, hopefully you're working on a job that is probably less stressful, because you're hiring people that have never done this before. So you can use that as an opportunity. Be patient with them and bring them up to speed. And we have ended up with a bunch of our camera operators, especially in Africa, end up getting hired to big broadcasts, because they, if you're willing to give them the feedback, people will get really good really fast if they're just listening. Go ahead, George.
One of the big ones I find too that in camera setup is lead room. So often folks don't remember that, you need to keep the person in frame and not give them a little bit of lead room versus having them.
And I call that nose room, yep. But lead room, same. Yeah, exactly. Same thing. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah. Also, after the show, I like to take the crew out to either dinner or whatever, and we talk about what just happened. Right. And I'll give them feedback. Like, listen, this was good. This was not so good. And so it really that feedback, because they are some of my people are my friends, and they're the ones that are available. So I just have to work with them, but they do get better with some instruction.
Self-deprecating humor cannot be underestimated. Like, making it okay, like telling stories about how you screwed things up, creates an environment where people get that you're not going to get it right all the time. And that creates an opening where you can give real feedback to people. You don't want people to feel like if they don't get good positive, what you want. I knew that someone was going to go far. He's now a producer at Facebook or whatever. When he walked up and, he walked up to me at the end of an event that went relatively good. And he goes, "What could I have done better?" He's not looking for compliments. He wants to know what was missing. And I trained a lot of guys in Pixel Core. They would just come to me after the event, what was missing, and then I just give them a long list. This is what was missing. But when you're asking for it, you want to get people to ask for it because we used to have I had a sign up that just said "Mind the gap," and that's the gap between perfection and where you're sitting, and what you're doing, and there's always a gap. And so you just want to keep pushing people to do that, but in a way that is safe, which I think we do a little bit here. Go ahead, Lois.
I don't know what the situation is where he says he have comms, but no kind of multi-view. On the cameras that we were using, which was in a television studio, there was a button on the side of the camera where you could switch between seeing what you're seeing and seeing what is being recorded. And so you could tell what other people were doing. And it was a great feedback when someone was just getting familiar with how to be a camera operator.
What we find is that for cheaper, when we have cheaper setups that don't have the returns, that's when we have to they just have to know what they're doing, and they won't be able to see those returns. Obviously, yeah, definitely. For most production cameras that I build up, we're going to have a separate monitor that's going to give them the return feed so they can see it against theirs. Or when those two match, we tell them when those two match, you're on air. So just know that when the two of them are the same, that means you're on. All right, next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis comes up next with what anyone use the transcription text-based podcast editor Descript and can comment on it or know of any similar tools out there.
Go ahead, Bill.
I've never used Descript, but my friends Phil and Greg at Intelligent Assistants have a system called Lumberjack, and I used it maybe 4 years ago for the first time and was astonished. It is a system where you take an iPad or an iPhone and you click on keywords as you go through the shoot. And at the end of the day, that all turns into metadata and works with Final Cut so that you have all of your keywords set up for all the scenes. It literally took 5 to 6 days of prep and consolidated into 1 hour. So these text-based systems that allow you to pre-edit or determine what's happening can be the most powerful things in the world. It takes some discipline to learn to use them, but once you do, man, the increased value of them are astonishing.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
About 1.5 years ago, I used a program called Otter, which does pretty much the same thing. The really cool thing, and then it's probably done some good improvements since then, but if you had like 2 people talking, it could actually determine which person was talking and then put the name in front of that, which I would guess that Descript has that type of feature as well. But that's a good one to give a try.
We had an hour with Simon Says. That's what I use for most of the stuff that I do. And Simon Says you can be in Final Cut. You can have all your stuff loaded. You throw things in and then you literally just push it to the web, and 15 minutes later it comes back with all the subtitles and everything else. But more importantly, on their website, you can go in and edit all the text, and it'll actually build an assembly for you based on that edited text. And then it'll just push it back out to Final Cut as basically just build the document in Final Cut for you with the assembly, which saves us, as Bill said, a lot of time, like not just a little bit of time. The way that we used to always do these with interviews is we would take the old way of doing this was we would do the interview. We would then send it to production transcripts in LA. They would, in a day or so, they'd bring a day or two, they'd send us back the transcripts. We'd then send those to the client. The client would then highlight what they wanted. Then they'd hand it back to us. And hopefully we remember to ask for time code. We go into the time code, we cut the assembly, and all of that stuff happened over a week, of putting that together. This is like almost nothing. Then the client, cuts and pastes what they want. And then we have it in sometimes a day, and with a 1/10 of the time. It's really amazing. So I don't have experience with Descript. I will say that Simon Says has been a backbone of what we're doing for the last 1.5 years or 2 years. Next question.
Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland is up next. He says, following on from my question yesterday, what audio format would you suggest I use to capture the funeral on filmic? PCM, AIFF, or AAC?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So the more important thing is to capture the funeral. I know you talked about it yesterday. We don't know what the iPhones are that you're using. We don't know if it's going to be your iPhones, if it's going to be the guests' iPhones. So capture what you can, and then work it in the background, because they want to have moments that they'll remember, rather than anything. If they're all your iPhones and you really want to work on it, then yeah, it would definitely go through the 3. But just try and capture as much content as possible.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, PCM, I would go with PCM because it's uncompressed. It's the most common digital format. It's cross-platform on everything. Everything reads it and writes it. So I would do that, especially if you don't know how post is going to be handled. If you go with one of the others, you may run into a problem that they can't read it easily or incorporate it into their editing system.
Yeah, I would record PCM if it's available. I'll always record PCM. The AIFF is close as far as what that you do have options for bit rates, so you could mistakenly knock it down by accident. I would definitely not use AAC unless that was my only choice, because now it really is going to be compressed and quantized. Next question.
Alfred Tigulo in Inglewood, California is up next with, has anyone considered using Discord audio as an audio source in a production or test live stream?
Go ahead, John.
Hey, Alfredo, I wouldn't use Discord for comms. We talked about that earlier today, but it's just not designed to do that. I don't know why you would use it to test the live streaming either. I would test on the platform that you're streaming on.
Rupert?
In terms of a production pipeline, like a contribution feed, I mean, I've sort of thought about it in my head, but you've got to watch out for like how persistent the connection would be if something drops. You've got to look at, other notifications coming in, or, all that stuff that really you just don't want to mess with.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, in a discussion about working with video crews, they said an Atem Mini can be a red flag, and they don't know what they're doing with audio. For example, balanced or unbalanced mic line level. Would getting a rack Atem with a panel be better perceived?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Depends on the application. I mean, I wouldn't try to judge somebody on the hardware that they use unless it's an inappropriate hardware. It's like bringing a gun to a knife fight. If you were doing an heavy audio program with an Atem Mini, you might have issues with unbalanced inputs and mic noise and things like that. But for the most part, the question is a little misleading, only in that I would not judge somebody by the equipment they bring. I judge them on the basis of how they are able to work with it.
Good, Jason.
Yeah, I'm very anti-snobbery. I mean, sure, if you want to mess with someone, like rent a 1ME, right? And then just use it to drive the Atem Mini and then see what they say.
Alex, you're muted, I believe.
I don't know how I got muted there, unless someone muted me. All right, go ahead. Tim?
Yeah, I think just like anything, everything has a learning curve, and you can learn how to do the audio with the Atem Mini or whatever system you're going to use. So within a matter of a couple of hours or a matter of just experimenting, you're on board. And then it's just a matter of training the people after you to utilize whatever. So don't throw it out just because there's a little bit of training involved.
You also just decide who you're trying to impress. Equipment definitely tells a client or tells other people that you're working with what your level of production is. So, I mean, there's definitely places that we have lots of Atem Minis, but there are definitely places that I wouldn't take them to because of how they would be perceived. So you definitely have to think through that. We've gotten lots of work because of the equipment that we used in the past. So it's not a trivial problem. Next question.
Tyler Darlington in San Diego is up next, and he says, how does the Blackmagic BiDirectional Converter 12G allow me to play HDCP content to an HDMI display and through the SDI output?
Go ahead, Jason.
Nope.
Yeah, Blackmagic is definitely any major company is not going to give you HDCP handshakes and then unprotected content, because that is against the law. The only place that you would find that would be Chinese companies that make cheap ones that you can find on Amazon for $60. So for HD, I think that I don't think that there's a 4K solution for that. There was a Chinese company about to release a 4K one, and wow, did people go crazy here. So So I don't think that there's a 4K solution for that, but many of them converter boxes will from China will do the HDCP handshake and then export SDI out from that thing. Not that I would ever do that, of course. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia is up next. He asks, concerned that the $20 microphone may be sold out before my seniors can purchase them, can Courtney or the panel recommend a second option?
Go ahead, John.
We tested this last night, and this $20 lapel mic sounds really good for $20. Second to that, Courtney can chime in too here, but I would go with the Pulsen after this one.
Go ahead, Bill.
Also, we've had amazing success with the fact that that may not be in the U.S., but check around the world, and we've got a lot of friends out there. And I know Alex has had circumstances where he's had somebody buy something in a different market that still had a lot of product and ship it into the U.S. cheaper than, even with things that are inexpensive. If you're getting a lot of them, maybe that would work.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I went to the website of the people that make this. What is it called? Whatever it is. Mayano. And they were out of stock at the company's website, but Amazon had them in stock. So they're in the warehouses. They distribute them out of the warehouses. So check your local Amazon dealer or local dealers that may handle that. They may have them still on the shelf.
Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles is next on the process. And Gordon says, when flying a Blackmagic URSA Mini Pro on a Steadicam with a Teradek, is there a way to send camera control through the Teradek? You'd like to be able to shade the camera.
No, not through the Teradek. So there's a tool that people have using an Arduino Shield that will that you can tie back to the camera that'll pass the return signal through an Arduino, and then it'll attach it back into the camera, and it uses Wi-Fi to do that. It's not incredible, but there's a company in LA, and I just can't think of the name off the top of their head, that kind of specialize in that. So you can get that return back to the URSA, but it's not through a traditional, the Teradek does not pass the VANC data, the video ANC, and that is what's missing so you can't send captions over a Teradek, and you also can't send camera control. Next question.
Frojan Banwell in San Diego, where I am, says, as a new Mac user, the N1 Mini delivery is expected tomorrow. What are good reasons to use the Magic Keyboard rather than one of my Corsair mechanical keyboards?
Go ahead, Rupert.
If you're in Zoom or doing live video, one thing you might want to compare is the noise of the typing or the keys from one versus the other. And the Magic Keyboard, though, I think if you keep it connected via wire, it will act as a wired keyboard. So just keep that in mind.
Mitchell?
+1 on Rupert. I mean, I have the Magic Keyboard on my M1 and it's silent. It's absolutely silent. But if I reach behind me, I've got an old IBM. That's the noise you're going to be hearing that Rupert was just talking about.
Yeah, I had one that was a real clickety-click type of keyboard, and I gave it to my daughter because she really liked it, and it made too much noise to be in meetings. Go ahead, Jason.
If you frequently use Apple Wake, Wake from sleep, if your Mac Mini usually goes to sleep, if you use Apple Pay a lot, those are two really good reasons. Other than that, save your money.
The next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California is up next. He says, what's a good way to stack or clean up several 1x4 HDMI splitters? We have about 8 of them, all in a big pile.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Switch over to an 8x8 routing switcher so that you can route the inputs to any of the outputs.
Well, 8x8. He's got a lot of them.
Two 8x8s. And if you can still find them, if Alex hasn't bought them all up from Monoprice yet.
Go ahead, Jason.
Just grab a few DIN rack and get some rack shelving. It'll clean it right up.
Yeah, we've even, for some of these, we printed them for the rack. So we just, you just figure out the measurements and we print them out and then put them in. The hard part is a lot of printers can't print 19 inches. so that has been part of our challenge. So a lot of times we have to build them in pieces and then put them back, kind of put them on a board. So you get a shelf, and then we glued them to the board, but we had to print them in 2 halves to get them, to be able to do that. But anyway, that will let you stack them up. That might be one way to do it. Does that make sense, Tim, for what you guys are doing? Or are they just sitting on a table?
They're just sitting. It's the typical thing where you start adding things so that you can send monitors. Different places, and it's basically the cameras go into there and then they just spaghetti out into everywhere else, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's the best thing to do is to, as Courtney said, find larger things that will do some of the same things, whether that's 2 of the 8x8 matrices or whatever, if you have the budget, is to back up a little bit and find something that, when you're building something for a show, it's pretty common for that to happen. When you're between shows, the key is to try to reduce the number of SPOFs, as we call it, single points of failure. So we look for SPOFs when we're between shows. Like, what SPOF did we create today? Next question.
JHB in New York says, when recording a Zoom call, is there any way to get the gallery view, speaker view, and isolated audios all in one location? Thanks.
Go ahead, Rupert.
So for some context, in a local recording in Zoom, you can have your isolated audio feeds. That's an option. And then in the cloud recording, you can opt to record speaker and gallery view separately. What I think the question is asking for the best of both worlds, and I don't think that exists. The way I would achieve it is have 2 machines locally. I'd get my ISO audios on one and maybe gallery view on that one, and then on the second machine record speaker, and then bring those in and line them up in post.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City here on the panel is interested in talking screen capture. He says, when using NDI screen capture, particularly on a Mac, what would prevent local apps, the browser, Finder windows, and so forth, from showing up as a viable source from the capture menu?
Go ahead, John.
I just checked mine, David. Mine are all there, but they're all open. So it's showing me all my open apps on that capture window. So I don't know what's going on.
Could be a spaces thing. Where it's in a different space. It's the only thing I can think of there. Next question.
Jack B in Phoenix, Arizona says, just ordered my Atem Mini Extreme ISO. What will I be able to do with it that I wasn't able to do with my Atem Mini Pro?
Go ahead, Jason.
Welcome, Jack. It's only going to get more expensive from here. You've got twice the inputs.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got
First
twice
hit's free.
the inputs. And let me finish. Twice the inputs and twice the outputs. You also have a headphone jack and super source. And when you're ready for SDI returns, prepare for more money.
Yeah. No, the super source is a big deal. I would definitely, if you have an Extreme, you need Mix Effect Pro. It literally multiplies the value of your system by about 10 because you now can pre-program a lot of those things. The super sources are super valuable, and they're almost unusable, in my opinion, without Mix Effect Pro. They're just not. Until we had that, it was just this painful, like, oh, let's not do super sources, all the time, because it was just like the programming and the macros and everything else was nothing that we wanted to deal with, and it just became seamless overnight. So that's the big thing. Next question.
George E. Kennedy says, is LTO, that fabulous sound of streaming linear backup digital tapes, still a valuable format for backup?
Go ahead, George.
So I'm just curious, and I'm going to switch my screen. We haven't talked about this much on office hours, and in the quest to figure out storage and backup. I mean, this is OWC's version. It's not exactly cheap. What I like that they did with this is it's actually available for rental. I'm not sure how much it is, but this is the price tag for the LTO unit. I mean, it goes all the way up to 8,000. But I'm just curious with folks, what are your thoughts? I know that it's used mostly in post-production, but what are your thoughts on LTO?
Go ahead, Courtney. Let's keep this one pretty quick as we go through it. Go ahead, Courtney.
I wouldn't use it for backup necessarily, but for archiving. If you're going to archive something, so you're going to put it on tape and put it away and not have to access that material till 10 years from now, 5 years from now, that would be a way. It's still viable. It's still used in production all the time for backing up masters and stems and things like that, for archival purposes, but not necessarily for backup that you would have to pull something out of, one file out of. It's not very it's not easy to get the stuff off of it randomly.
Go ahead, Jason.
I think the reason that it's available for rent is because a lot of people are trying to get their data off of LTO, not putting it back on. If you look at the cost per gigabyte for a standard mechanical hard drive, I think Fenwick has the right idea. One job, one hard drive, file it.
The main thing is if you're going to put them on hard drives, you want to figure out how you're going to keep spinning them up about every 6 months. So you want to build a tickler system. We had, I think, at one point at our height in Pixel Core, we probably had 2,000 drives that were
absolutely,
that were
absolutely.
primary. They were primary and backup. So if anything mattered, if it was enough to if it was important enough to archive, we would make 2 of them, and then we would have them in mostly in separate rooms. We tried to do that, the most important stuff was in separate facilities, and then. What we would do is we had an archivist. I mean, we were doing enough work because we were generating about 10 to 15 terabytes a week. So we had somebody that just manages that. That's all they did. And they would back those all up into those drives, primary and backup. These are just in little little drive toasters that they'd put them in. And then we scanned them. It's like a CD scanner or something. We scanned them for all the names. We were very careful about our naming conventions so that we knew what that meant. In that structure, we were able to find anything that someone asked for within 15 minutes. Like it was just, and that was, 5 or 6 years, and, hundreds of terabytes, and we could find something in 15 minutes. Like it was
I have to emphasize that it is super important to spin up hard drives. You can't just file.
Yeah. So, but what happened was in the downtime for archivist, he was just slowly working through them all, and he would just do a search. He would just put it in, search it. And it would that's enough for it to kind of spin through it and then put it away. And then, and that's all he did. That's what he did between archives. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so there are a lot of great reasons people still use LTO tape today, and that's not only in production but also in enterprise. It's got a low error rate. It is more secure. It has it's still got a roadmap for scalability going for it. And it's open format, so you can use it for whatever you need it to do. And of course, if you store it right, it's got probably one of the longest lives that you have. So, but having it as the ultimate last backup is probably your best option there.
Go ahead, Rupert.
For backup for disaster recovery, part of that plan has to be the availability of the equipment to recover that data in case of a disaster. So you need to plan that into your plan, in terms of supply chain shortages or, global problems. You need to make sure that you're prepped with the equipment to read that if you have to recover from a disaster.
Next question.
Andre Dalla and Bolin is up next. He says, what are the panel's opinions about the new Roland V160 HD? Spec-wise, it seems to be a packed beast for quite a good price.
It does look amazing. I mean, I think that for a lot of us, the problem is that it's the ecosystem. The reason a lot of us use Blackmagic cameras and Blackmagic hardware is because of the entire ecosystem. If Roland made cameras that tied into that, and if they built an API that let us control it, we'd probably be much more interested in their product. I think for a lot of people who don't need any of that, then I think it's an incredible product. I mean, SDI and HDMI and tons of scalers and tons of other bits and pieces. I think the hard part is that once you get used to an ecosystem, and this is what the big advantage Blackmagic has, is that once you get used to an ecosystem, it's really hard to break out because there's so many things that are tied to it. And I think that's the challenge for Roland. Next question.
Lois Richter in Davis, California is up next with, when there are 2 people in the same room, is it better to use one mic or separate mics?
Go ahead, Rupert.
And I think 2 mics separate mics would always be preferred, ideally through a mixer. But these days it depends whether this is through Zoom or not. Because these Zoom type hybrid situations, if separate mics means you're coming into separate Zoom contributions, then you're going to have a kind of bit of a mess on your hands there. But just depends a little bit.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, my go-to setup for that, particularly if they're seated getting interviews, Lois, I don't know if they're going to be moving around or seated. Okay, she's nodding, so I think that means yes. I would use 2 wired lavs on them to avoid any wireless shenanigans, which generally happen, particularly in this world of repacking TV signals, and a shotgun overhead. Set to Omni so that it can cover both of them, or somebody to operate it. And that way you've got a situation where you're not worried about the wireless working correctly. And even if you did, you could still cover it with the overhead shot.
Go ahead, Mitchell, real quick. I'm sorry,
done.
Bill, real
Thanks.
quick. Sorry. I was trying to...
Real fast, always the inverse square principle is the one physics part you can't get away from. So if I had two people in the same room, I would want lavs on them as close to their mic as possible so that the room sound is suppressed versus their voice. You'll have isolation and can mix them a little easier than if you have one overhead.
And by the way, for those of you in this getting ready for the second hour, I accidentally kicked a couple questions back that were second hour questions. So go ahead and push them back forward if they're second hour questions, not first hour questions. I found a little bug in Mukana. we'll solve later. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego is up next. Says, has anyone used the center stage camera on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and how well does the automatic tracking work?
Tony?
It works great, really good. I would encourage him to ask Ray Maxwell about it because he uses it a lot more than I do, but it does work very well.
I just wish it had some settings. I feel like it has too much headroom. Like when its auto setting for thing is too much headroom. It's like tons of headroom over top people's head. It's just not modern. Next question.
Comes from Albie in San Antonio, and Albie asks, has anyone used the new Rode Lavalier 2 mic? There are some people around the net that have them, thinking of investing in one, or should I get the $20 one? By the way, what is this amazing $20 lav mic called?
Who makes the $20 lav again?
Aono. Like, yeah, just
we'll put it into
the Fonz meets Yoko, Aono.
There we go. But yeah,
While he
we'll put it into the Mukana. Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina has our last regular hour question. And he says, I have a large 49-inch curved computer display, and I'm looking for recommendations for a high-quality gas spring arm to mount it at my workstation.
Go ahead, Jason.
You can't beat Ergotron. They really are the best. I wouldn't go cheap for something that large, and I would assume that heavy. I love Ergotron.
Yeah, and the other one to look at is monitors in motion. For me, those have been the most expensive, but the highest quality arms. Everything I put on, we bought them for our school, and everything you put on them feels like it's weightless. Like you just kind of push down and it just goes down, and push up and you just move it around. And but they aren't, to Jason's point, those ones aren't cheap either. But once you want them to be high quality, I would look at Ergotron as a good one, and monitors in motion are the other one that I would.
Also makes them, right?
Yeah, I haven't played with those ones, but yeah, the only ones I really have a lot of experience with when it comes to high end arms is the monitors in motion. All right. We are now changing subjects to our second hour. We're going to do an Office Hours 2.0. So if you have questions about Office Hours 2.0 while we're talking, go ahead and throw those in. And I'm going to hand it off to Andy to give us an update on how things are going.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity, Alex, to check in every week about how we're doing with Office Hours 2.0. A bunch of different things in the works at this moment right now. The big one is just a lot of handoff. So getting JJ, I think, up to speed has been really terrific this week. He's been very thorough in his testing and reviewing of things. So from Tuesday onward, basically, JJ has brought the bots in, sort of conditioned the system. We figured out where there were things that weren't documented that would make sense in terms of the handoff procedure and things like that. So that's all been really, really helpful. I've continued to work on the graphics logic, not the graphic content. That's a separate team that has their own meetings, and I look forward to hearing more about what they've been up to. But when we play a graphic, how the operator interacts with that graphic. So, for example, right now the graphic is designed to meet up with the super source, right? So the super source is sort of trimmed at the bottom, and I don't know, JJ, if you're able to cut over to that so it's easier to see. But they sort of have a black space at the bottom of the super sources that meet when the title comes in. But if the title's not there, the super source looks silly. And likewise, that title is so tall that if we're on anything other than the super source and the title is there, it doesn't look right. So what I'm trying to do is basically build a lot of those associations so that when we're on the right type of thing, it becomes the right type of graphic. Like there, when JJ cut to me, it pulled the graphic out. But we also gave some operator basically intervention tools to be able to determine which graphic we're on if you want to do your own system for how that cuts together. Now, eventually, I think a lot of this is going to go away because we'll just redo the graphics and we'll get the graphics looking the way we want them to look. But in the meantime, it was interesting to play with that dynamic of how how to get these multiple systems to coordinate with each other about when to play content up automatically, because again, we're trying to reduce the amount of work that the operator has to be conscious of. I will say that if you've been following the name graphics that follow at the bottom, they're working pretty well. They're putting up the accurate Zoom username of the person who's speaking at the time. I think we need to get rid of the animation that plays on them, because it's just constantly triggering that every single time we change. It can be a hard cut, I think, for the text in that graphic, because the speaker changes so frequently in the show, especially during a discussion section. But I think those are, the interesting kind of learnings of how that graphic system plays in with Zoom and the way that Zoom cuts and things like that when we're having speakers back and forth. We did a bunch of software updates today, actually, during the show. Updated Zoom OSC to the latest beta, which now has threading in it, so it's a little faster. It's able to run more efficiently on the B-Links cores, so we can get out the. We were missing some packets that were coming in, and they were just getting dropped. So the faster version of it has been able to keep up with that packet integrity a little bit more. Other than that, I think I've been excited to see, just sort of tangentially to 2.0, the adoption of some of what we've been doing in 2.0. Both for Guy's practice that he's been looking at with DVE Store and how to control the cameras. For the Belfast method, they've started to pick up some of the stuff that we've been doing and implementing on their side to great success, it seems, so far. So I've been happy to see all of that sort of peripheral work. But that's kind of a snapshot of where we are right now.
Yeah, and I think that hopefully we'll be able to update those. I know that I think that the time, everybody's putting in their volunteer time, but I think that the graphics team probably might need more people if you're interested. So ping me to let me know if you're interested in working on that. Mostly 2D graphics is mostly what we're looking for, just to kind of give them a little bit more time, a little more space. It's a great way to learn on how to do that. So if you're interested and you have some experience, it's probably not the place to learn from scratch. But you want to contribute to that, ping me in Discord, and we'll see if we can't get you added to the team. I think that one of the things that I'm hoping that we see over the next week is to, start having the super sources and some of the other stuff push the envelope of what we're doing with HDR. So we want to, see what that looks like and how that works. And so we'll probably be pushing things in on Monday that have some things that are there that you'll start to see. Hopefully the countdown clock on Monday will be pushing it will be designed to push the envelope of HDR. So, and hopefully we'll have the playback system working for that. We're working on that. But the design of the countdown clock will be specifically to push the outer envelope of what HDR looks like without hopefully burning in anything. So that's part of the challenge is you put a countdown clock up and you have some of the characters sitting there for a long time, and you have to be careful of whether they burn in on OLED screens. So we have to, there's a bunch of things we have to think about when we do that. So I think that those are, definitely some of the stuff that we're thinking about. I think that the super source cascade is starting to work pretty well as far as how Mukana hands that off. I know we had some issues where the lower third ID we were pulling that from the wrong place. Andy, do you know if did that get updated?
Yeah, I mentioned that to Chris. I think it's been getting better. He's got a couple of things that he said are a little more involved that he wants to do to sort of validate a bunch of that stuff. So I think there's still a little bit of work to be done there. I will say, yeah, I think the super sources have been working well. There's a couple of edge cases I still need to clamp down on just to keep things from, like, for example, if you happen to accept 2 people within the course of a second, the API misses that because it only updates once a second or something like that. So I've been trying to just start to build out some edge cases and conditions for basically studying you and what you're doing as the host, so that we know what to do. Yeah.
Which is, sorry, I apologize in advance. I know one of the things that we were challenged with for a little while was when we had too many people or too few people in the gallery. Has that been what do we do when we go over 20?
Yeah, so when we go over 20, we don't physically have enough inputs to be able to put everybody into the show. So I think that's sort of a show architecture question of do you need, right? I'll put it like this. So there were a couple of things we could do here. Number one was we could use the fact that ZoomISO has the ability to replace users on the fly to basically reassign our inputs to different users. When we talked about that, we were concerned that would make it sort of a chaotic situation for the TD, where your inputs are actually changing and you're trying to remember who's on what input and see that in your multiview. So it seemed like that would be less advantageous. So what we do right now is we statically assign users to inputs at the top of show, and we do that right after mic checks. That's why it's so important that everybody has their name and their video on so we can capture and make sure that's all working. So we get everybody in, and we basically, for the rest of the show, you are that input number. Now, we have the ability to reassign you within those inputs, but we only have 20 inputs of Zoom users. So if we have more than 20 people, we
theoretically
manual replacements midway through the show to get them in.
Right. And the reality is that there's two things. One is we could, for another grand or whatever, put another system in, then we'd have 24 outputs from that. I think that 20 is enough. I strongly think that 24 is enough. Based on I find as the host, more than 24, and I can't believe we're even talking about 24. It used to be 4. Like when people said, "What are you going to do for a roundtable?" I go, "Well, 4 people is great," And now the fact that we're like, "Oh, is it 20 or 24?" is kind of an insane thing to think about. But I do find that I feel it as the host. I feel the pressure of the answers at about 10. Like it becomes like when we go under 10, I feel like I'm going to have to dance a lot more. Anytime I answer, if you're wondering when you're watching the show, anytime you see me answer the question first, it means there was nobody queued. Like the only time I answer the question out of the gate is that no one's queued up. Now, sometimes someone puts their hand up while I'm talking and then we jump to them. And if I just answer a question and I hand it off and we go to the next question, that means nobody in the panel raised their hand. Like that, just so you know, that's the inside baseball for all of you watching. And I just answer I'll do my best. And sometimes if I can't do my best, I'll go, "Well, you stumped us." And that happens about once or twice a week. Out of, when you put it into perspective, we answer, on average, and I don't know if John has this, but from my anecdotal, what I look at and I measure each day, I believe that we answer approximately 300 questions a week. So we average it appears that we average about 25 questions an hour is really the kind of the range, and that's what I'm looking for. Just so you know, like I'm actually, and then we have really high ones like the one we had last week with Parsec. Was it last week? I can't remember anymore. But the one with Parsec was, I think we answered 50 questions in 1 hour. Like it was, and that was kind of an incredible speed. But normally we answer about 25. And again, to go back to this, that's twice what I used to tell clients. I used to tell them that you could do 12 questions an hour. That's what you should bet on. So our question velocity, and I think that has a lot to do with the back end. Our question velocity is much higher than it used to be in that process, and so we cover more ground. And I don't think we're losing. I mean, in general, I'm allowing the questions to be answered. It's just that we're moving faster from one person to the next, and I do tighten it. Like I go, okay, we either have the people or the question has been answered, and you'll see me on the back end. The panelists will see me lock the question. Like I believe I'll have enough of an answer there. There's nothing to add to that answer if we add more people. And so rather than running on, it's allowed me to kind of that tool has been really valuable. Other things that we've added to Makana is we're putting in a limiter to the number of questions one person can have in the system at once. You'll see it kind of pop up. If you ask a lot of questions, you'll see it pop up. So that it's mostly because what we're finding is that if one person, it's very, very valuable for people to be able to stack up questions, especially for the second hour. If too many questions get stacked up by one person or two people, we found that it has a negative impact on what other people do. Like they'll go, "Oh, there's 20 questions. They're not going to get to mine," and they don't ask a question. So we did find it important in general to just find a way to, like, how many do we want to have? Do we want to have it be 1 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 2? And for different shows, we don't want to have it be a hard limit of 2 or 3 or 4. For different shows, we can scale that up and down. And so that control is relatively new and working most of the time. so anyway, so we're working through that. As that works through. Anyway, so yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I think the other part of your question there was what happens if we have too few in terms of what happens to the gallery view, and that's a project that I think I'm really excited to once we get, I think, a little bit further in our Isadora training labs, so that we have just a little bit more of a common vocabulary. I'd like to build that system as a group because there's a couple things we need to do. We need to deal with it at the MV16, so we got to talk about the MV16's control protocol. We have to, which is going to be both. We have to talk about the Constellation's Video Hub protocols. We have to be able to route people to the 16 inputs to that MV16. Then we have to tell the MV16 whether we want it to have 16 or 9 based on the number of people that we have on screen. We have to build rules to keep scores of the people speaking scores. And I've drafted all of the sort of the backbone of that out in the actors and with plugins and things like that. So it'll be a lot of nodal work for all of us to do, but it'll also be an opportunity that if we have specific behavior that we want to do, like try to emulate the sliding of the gallery view, which we don't necessarily like, but also there is something to be said for having your most relevant people in the top left corner of the screen. If we want to start to begin to emulate some of that behavior, it'll be a good opportunity for those who know JavaScript to get involved and help us code up that behavior so that we can put it as a new plugin into the Isadora file. So that's a project that I'm intentionally sort of deferring until, as a community, we have the ability to really engage with it together, because I think there's a lot we can do there.
And as a note, for the Isadora lab, we're going to move that Wednesday through Thursday next week, not this week. Not this week. We're going to keep it the same. I missed yesterday. It turns out that there's two things that happen. One is that it turns out the afternoon is almost impossible for me to do. Like, I do it, but it's really it's been a thing. And also, we're not able to include our European partners, and we make Elle stay up really late to do all this, to hang out with us. And so as I looked at all the things, so what we're going to do is we're going to try moving that lab to 9 a.m. so that it happens right after the, so instead we have it happen right after the event, which I think will be actually more like, we'll just come out of this and then we'll go right into that. And I think it'll actually be easier for a lot of people. So anyway, so stay tuned for that as we kind of move that lab. It'll be that for the rest of December, and then in January we'll make another decision about where that might have to go. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. We've got some questions stacking up. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
We do. The first one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, if we were to uplink Office Hours 2.0 to a satellite, what hardware and software changes would need to be made? Would it just be an SDI output from the Constellation?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, I guess if you were doing a video broadcast over satellite, you'd have a video handoff. But if you're using it for backhaul, it might just go into an encoder and go over IP.
Yeah, for us at the facility that we're at, 090 is already sitting on top of an LTN network. So literally, it would be us scheduling an uplink. Like the hardware would take, there'd be no added. I mean, in 090s, we would be able to do an IP connection to a bureau, and then they would just push it up to the satellite. So, or we'd have to get a dish, which we would try to probably avoid, because that's what we would call a legacy technology, which is still useful, and I'm using one next week. so it's still useful, but not the direction where most of us are going. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has another one. He says, Microsoft Teams will now send isolated audio channels via NDI. Would that make it advantageous to integrate it into the Office Hours 2.5 or Office Hours 3.0 workflow?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think it's very cool that Teams is getting to that point where they are showing, I think they're setting an example to large teleconferencing solutions about what they should be doing. Now, do I think that Zoom will eventually introduce that and we'll have the ability to get that at a certain point? Probably yes. Remember, we already have the basis of this in the Zoom Rooms NDI embedded audio outputs. Now, we know that we're going to need a bit more than that. We don't want to be de-embedding audio from NDI feeds and injecting them into SDI feeds. We need it in a more open way. But it's showing competition right now. Will I say that, just on the basis of Teams adding embedded audio, would I switch to Teams? Absolutely not. There's way too many other things that get in the way of that. And I by the looks of the reactions of the folks on the panel, I think we're sort of in agreement that we would prefer to not use Teams, even if it had some better features there, because of all the other baggage that comes along with it. But it does show that they're moving at a faster pace, I think, than Zoom is when it comes to production features.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely the one as far as the velocity. I think that Teams is moving faster. I think it's got a long way to catch up, and I think that Zoom could turn that gas on almost at any point in time and push further out. So hopefully they'll keep on moving that direction. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers here in the panel from Madison, Wisconsin asks, is JJ the on-site person, or will it be set up so that anyone can fulfill that role?
Go ahead, Andy.
I mean, with anything that involves physical infrastructure, I think you should have some provision to be able to physically access it, right? So JJ is playing a critical role in both the he's doing two things at once, right? So in one capacity, yes, he is the boots on the ground, that if we need to go restart a piece of equipment, or we need to deal with an internet connection or something that requires a physical presence, he's able to do that. But he's also building up a general knowledge of the system so that he understands how it functions and can sort of administer things on his side. So he's learning more, I think, than he strictly needs to because of his proximity to the system, but it's just good to have that information in general. Now, I will say that a shocking amount of the entire system setup can be done remotely, especially through the Universe Web UI. So all the bots joining the meeting, all of the outputs being configured, all of that stuff is done through Universe elements. Even simple things like logging the bots in and things like that, it's all handled through the Universe UI. So my goal is that the day-to-day operations don't require any on-prem intervention, but any maintenance type things will likely require somebody local to be able to adjust a wire if we need or something like that. But again, with the video hub present there, we can even do basic rewiring all through remote connections because it's passing the web request, turning it into the command that the Atem hardware wants to take. So you're able to do quite a bit of interfacing with this hardware remotely, which I think speaks to the power of like this Universe and Isadora-based connection flow.
And definitely the goal is to get to a point where we're not dedicated or we don't need to have anybody on site. But I think that in general, if anything mattered, we'd always have somebody on site, like for the next month or two, we'll definitely want to have somebody on site when we're doing this. But I think that, but the goal is to get to a point where it's totally self-contained. I mean, the end goal 2 years from now will be all in the cloud, or a year from now, whenever. We're just waiting for all the technologies to come together to make that worth it. Next question.
Rupert McCrae here on the panel from Dallas. What's the current go live target date for Office Hours 2.0?
Current is January 1. But what I will say is that the absolute is when we're ready. Like, I'm in no rush to, I have to admit there was this huge, like, oh, we're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to make all this work. And I was pretty stressed out about the whole thing. And then I realized we can just keep doing what we've been doing because of the way this sits, because I don't have to change the entire infrastructure of what we're doing. We can keep on going the way we're going and continue to progress it. Now, I don't think that we can get the kind of energy that from Andy and that we're getting right now. Andy and Jonathan have put in incredible hours into making this work, and we're very fortunate that they've been willing to do that. But I think that we have to, that's why it's really important for us to come up to speed, for us to get everything working, as well as, giving them what they need to be successful. And then work on these handoff projects so that, I hope that Andy and Jonathan will be able to work with us for years to come. But I know that it can't last like the way it is right now. so we want to make sure that we become as self-sufficient and stable as possible, as fast as possible. But I think that, my goal again is January 1, where that's the new public form. Now, the other thing we have to figure out, which we had some discussions about earlier this week, is also, I'm going to start next week. I'm going to start doing, experimenting with an SDR and HDR output. So that's going to be taking another link and giving it an SDR output from the FS HDR and then sending that up to YouTube so that we have two different versions of the show. And that becomes even more complicated as we move forward because basically what's going to happen is that we have to take everybody here and convert them to HDR, preferably in an FS HDR, which we're doing now. We're doing the whole show right now. Like, if you look at it now, by the way, I just turned up a dial that makes it look much more HDR than it did a second ago. Anyway, I play with the FS HDR while you guys are talking. Anyway, I was like, I wonder what this does, and I turned it up, and I was like, wow, it's the muchness filter. So anyway, so right now we take the program and we convert it to HDR and we send it up to YouTube in the backend for the 2.0 test. What we need to do in the future is we need to convert everybody here into HDR, feed them into the switcher as HDR, have the switcher then, process all of that, and then output, and it's a little complicated there. The switcher's we're gonna have to allow the switcher to do the upscale and resolution and everything else. Anyway, but the point is that we color correct everybody individually, send them all in individually. Then the switcher is going to receive us as HDR, but it's also going to receive HDR content, the graphics, the playback, and potentially surround audio and everything. Not the switcher, that'll be downstream. But the point is, all of those things have to come in. Now, when it goes back out again, what was SDR has to be folded. Now HDR has to be folded back down to SDR. The 5.1 has to be folded back down to stereo, and sent to one direction. And then as we talked a little bit earlier, we're hoping to be able to do 5.1 soon. And then the HDR goes out to YouTube as well. So those are, all of that stuff is going to be a little bit more complicated, and we're going to be working on it this month. While Andy's doing everything else, and while Chris and everybody else is putting stuff together, I'm trying to figure out that workflow. Next question.
John Preto in Las Vegas says, isn't it true that the bots have formed a union and have demanded equal rights with other panelists?
Go ahead, Rupert.
This was true for a time. That problem has been taken care of.
We said we can just buy another set of Mac Minis. If you
I saw them out front virtually with little signs going, better power conditioning. They were really upset.
They were like, we want UPSs. We want UPSs. All right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, you mentioned the procedure for starting and stopping the system. Will you be sharing those procedures appropriately sanitized on GitHub so that we can use the model for our own systems and shows?
Go ahead, Andy.
The entire Isadora patch will be available to everybody once it's sanitized. I have to be a little careful. I was about to share it, and then I thought to myself, oh wait, I'm going to expose all the Mukana APIs to the entire world when I publish this. I better go through and delete those. So, and I think but there's two parts to it. So yes, I can get the file up there and you can see exactly how it works. However, I think that it's less of a rush than we might perceive, because if you haven't been participating in the office hours Isadora labs, seeing the file is relatively useless to you, to be frank. There's a lot going on with it. There's a lot of different pieces, and we're breaking that down, I think, the basics of how to interface with it and understand it in the labs. So I think once we get to a point where posting that file will be helpful, and it's got a bunch of additional bug fixes and things like that are in it, I think that's a good point to turn it over. Right now, I think I'd upload the file and somebody might download it and open it and be like, well, that's cool, but not really understand where the endpoints are and what the en-roads are and how we think about programming Isadora for show control, which we're just getting into the beginnings of in the labs right now.
And it's super important to go into the labs if you're at all interested in rebuilding what we're doing. You're not going to be able to open this up and have it make any sense if you're not figuring out how Isadora works and how it thinks, and and all those other things are things that are really, really important. It's a really valuable couple hours a week to go through. So I would highly recommend sitting in on those labs. And even remember, Isadora is free if you don't save. So you can just go in there and follow along with what we're doing. We're doing it relatively slowly and kind of moving down that path. So I think that it's I would highly recommend checking it out. All right, next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, wouldn't most of the panelist switching be simplified with software switching?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the way that I built the Isadora file and actually the whole Office Hours 2.0 pipeline, it sort of has like a hop that it makes when it goes to the hardware. And you could pull off the hardware connections and put in vMix connections or whatever it is you wanted. And all the logical work will still be exactly the same. And then just what API commands it calls and what it points at, basically, if it's a web request or a TCP packet or whatever, that you can swap out kind of like a modular part and you can build your own connection. I think, yeah, some things become a lot easier when you get into software switching. As cool as MixEffect is for allowing it to allowing your hardware to act a lot more like the way a software video engine would work, it's not quite the same still. There's still concepts that you don't have in software switching land, like cascading super sources and stuff like that, that you don't need in the software world, because you can just spin up 8 or spin up 10. It doesn't matter what DV they're on, right? So we still have a bunch of those hoops that we jump through. So in that regard, I agree with you. I will say that there are, again, we go back to the HDR, the 10-bit, all that stuff, eventually getting into surround audio and things like that, as Alex has mentioned, and that's going to become harder to do inside of a strictly software-based environment. There's other things that I was talking to Jonathan the other day about this, like that I'm sort of taking for granted now, because I've been thinking a lot about, what would it look like to do this with vMix, and I've sort of gone back to wondering, like, well, okay, right now I don't have to consider what the implications are of having 40 4K video signals going through a single mixing environment, because the Constellation just does it, and it does it really well. I never have to even think about that. But I've done vMix projects that were a fraction of the number of inputs and the fraction of the amount of pixels being pushed through, and I've melted, computers before on that, and I've brought it down pretty significantly. Now, it does scale well, the updates make it better, and there's probably ways to do it. But there's a lot that we take for granted by having this hardware that just does what it's supposed to do, and we don't have to worry about overloading it. So you get the benefit of having a more flexible system, but you also then expose yourself to having fundamental things not working, just based on the scale that this operation runs at. So give it.
I mean, eventually we're going to be doing a version of this that's 514 and with that's in HDR and potentially Vision. That there'll be a version of it that we're starting to test going down that path. We're definitely doing HDR 10 and 5.1 within the next couple months. Those things are difficult to do in software. And then also think about the fact that when we get all the FSHDRs in place, we will be able to color correct 20 people in real time, and basically re-expose that color correction through Universe. So what we're working on, for this, if all goes well, there'll be one FSHDR for every 4 people in the group, which is also why adding more people randomly becomes more and more painful. That's why we also want hard connections, because that color correction will be for every person. So eventually what we're working on is, imagine a Universe interface where you've got 20, and the names pop up, and you click on this person, and you have what I've been playing with on the back end in the FSHDR is, what are the sliders that actually make a difference for each person? So what are the sliders that make a person look better or worse or whatever? Then we only expose 5 or 6 sliders to an operator, so that someone anywhere in the world can look at somebody and look at me and say, he's got a little too much contrast, or the blues are a little off, or whatever, and make those adjustments in Universe on a web page. And it's actually changing mine. And that becomes more important as we move to HDR, because every little thing that you're wrong looks really wrong in HDR. In SDR, it looks, it's a little off. But you really see it in HDR. So it's really important for us to be able to tie, all that back in. And I'm happy to be educated by folks here, but I think that is a pretty, what we're doing there, and the amount of signal and everything else that's being done, I don't know of how to do that. It may be possible in the cloud. I don't know how. So we're gonna, and we have the hardware, so we're gonna keep on, edging down that path as we go. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas, in this case, says, what do the node numbers represent in the multiview? For example, OH node 5.1.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yes, so you have 5 M1 Mac Minis, each have 4 SDI outputs coming from a deck link. So the way that we designate that is, for example, Mac Mini 2 is going to have 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. And the way that it's laid out is, if you look at OH 2.02, which is one of those Zoom room returns, each vertical column of users is a computer, and then their index down from top to bottom is the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. The exception is number 5, which is in a different layout because we have program preview, so that's 5 across at the bottom of OH 2.0 proper. So it's a way for us to quickly be able to not only reference an input number, but to also know which computer it's coming from. And there's a whole thing with the deck links where odd and even numbers play, and it's not 1, 2, 3, 4 across. It's odd numbers, then even numbers, and all of that. So it helps us keep all of that messiness consistent by designating the computer and designating the input from that computer.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, is up next. If comms is rolled into Office Hours 2.0, will there be any integration into the 2.0 infrastructure, or will it be kept separated?
Right now, I think that we're going to end up integrating Unity, into the process. I mean, that's the kind of the direction that we're going right now. I'm even considering having Unity be in the short term until we get true. There's two problems. One is, I think that will be probably solved early next year. It's my guess. Another one will take for a long time is, we need to get true ISOs from every person out of Zoom. That is going to take a while. I don't know when. The more important one is, I need returns for every person, so I can talk into every person's ear, or not me, but somebody can talk into their ear. And that is that's something that's more pushed to us. Until we have both of those things, we're probably going to move to Unity for the audio for all the panelists, so that the panelists we can build PLs that are just for the panelists. And so what'll happen is, as you start to become a panelist here, in addition to signing into the panelist panel and raising your hand, you'll need to open up Unity comms, and you don't have to have a Stream Deck or anything, but you'll need to have it open, because eventually, probably within the next 6 weeks, your audio will be in Unity comms as opposed to coming out of Zoom. So your video will be coming to us over Zoom, and we're doing that I feel like Zoom eventually will come around to giving us both of those things, but until they do, which I think could take a year at least, to get both directions. we'll use Unity comms. Again, this is where we're going to do things today that we know will be hopefully replaced in the future. But between now and then, we're going to get really good at the wetware of that. Like, how do we actually run a show that way? The other advantage of having those Unity comms that way is they're all going to go into a mixer that has individual delays for every person. And if you see some of the other stuff we played with the Isadora Lab, is the ability to show colors and frequencies and tie those back into delay. We think that there's a way that we can get to a point where all the panelists at the beginning of a show could literally lift their phones to the center of their screen, play something, and the whole system will actually do all the delays for every audio to sync them all up. So literally before the mic check, we could sync everybody's audio in a minute, without anybody pulling any triggers at all. Like literally everyone just lifts something up, holds it there, and the whole system will just tie the whole thing together, and it may not be perfectly accurate, but it'll be a lot better than anything else we're doing. And it'll be automatic, and it will look as good as anything you see on Zoom. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back up again. This time he says, you mentioned the end goal as everything in the cloud. How would you replace the Video Hub constellation? From what I've seen in the Mobley process, vMix is designed around human operation.
Go ahead, Andy.
vMix also has a very robust web API. So we would do basically the same thing that we did with the Constellation, which you could say is even more intended to be human operated because it requires a human being to be somewhere in the vicinity of its buttons or its breakout panels. But using IP, so in Atem world, we use IP-based control. In vMix world, we use like a REST API, basically web requests to be able to talk to it. So we can do all the same things, and it has an equally robust API, being able to set even further actually, because it can do things like roll its own graphics, right? So you could have the graphics generation, the cutting, the super sources, whatever you want to call the equivalent in vMix world. All of that could be done within just the vMix application without having to have MixEffect doing some of it, Video Hub Protocol doing some of it. Like vMix just has all that inside of it, and it's all exposed to a web API. So it would be equally remote controllable.
One of the things that we have to, and Andy touched on this earlier, that we have to do for the math as well is figure out how much it's going to cost us per show. We do a 2-hour show. This requires how many, to replace what we're building right now in hardware, how many instances do we have to build, and what kinds of instances do we have to build for, in AWS to have the same feature set, to bring in X number of people and put them all up and make all of that work. I have a theory that could cost us, potentially $1,000 to $2,000 a month just in cloud costs. So we have to, while we can say all the stuff looks like it could just be done in the cloud, sure, the hardware and the turnkey of the hardware system that we're building is expensive. But how long does it take before the cloud bypasses it and then becomes more expensive than the hardware? So we're also need to do the math on that as well. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think to that point, where it's going to be helpful in the cloud is when you have incidental productions that you're spinning up for a client and you need to deploy a lot of infrastructure and you want to use all the benefits of how 2.0 works and make that work for you. Where cloud, I think, is still sort of a TBD thing is if you're doing daily productions at large scale, it seems like you'd want to cement those costs a little bit more than pay as, and that's true of anything, right? Renting a car, renting anything that you pay as you go. If you're planning to do this every day for years, it makes more sense, generally speaking, to own than it does to pay as you go. So I think it's just a question of what is your production company trying to do? Are you doing this every single day for various clients, or is this like something you roll out once a month? In which case it could be, it would take years maybe to reach the cost of deploying the hardware. So I think we just have to look at how we build it out. But I think for office hours, if it's a daily conversation where you're going to have 20 ingests coming in there, you're going to have all these contribution nodes, you're going to need a very high-end, I think, vMix node to be able to manage all of that. That's going to be expensive.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back. He asked this time, I've been able to grasp Isadora very quickly and have done several small projects, which I've shared in the Discord. Could I easily grasp the file once I see it and ask Andy at all if I have any questions?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think the file is there to, I think it's good that you have that foundation of understanding how Isadora works and all of that. I think that what we're really talking about in the 2.0 labs is the specific connection to every type of hardware and software, right? Understanding the interaction that you have with MixEffect, or the interaction that you have with Video Hub Protocol, or the interaction you have with a web API. Those are the things that you don't learn by just learning Isadora the program. It's Isadora in relation to all the peripheral software. Now, I'm not going to speak to what you would and would not understand. I believe that you'd probably be able to look at that, and many of you would, and have a good sense of what's going on there. But I think in order to make a contribution back, we need to get to the point as a community where we are understanding the basic vocabulary of that file. But again, I'm not holding it because I want to hold it. I'm holding it because I need to do more work on it, and I think it's there's a better time to do it.
And the more you can do in Isadora right now, the better, as far as like working through it, being part of the labs, and figuring out, even though it seems like we're doing simple things, it's also we're working through some, and the good news is if you're getting started, we're doing some simple things, but there's a lot you can kind of keep expounding on. That's what I keep on finding, oh, I can do these three things, and oh, I got to figure this out. So next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, here on the panel says, I hear some Zoom representatives have been impressed by the quality of office hours. Might they be left speechless by 2.0?
I don't know, but I can say that that's the big plan. Just, like we're competitive bunch, and so our goal is is absolutely to get to a point where everybody is kind of impressed with where we're going with it. The idea that you could have video quality among a lot of people here, that we've taken the video quality across everybody here to a whole different level than what we see on TV for remote contribution off of people's houses. And then when we take this to a point where anybody can edit it on the web, that it's in HDR, and like my goal is to outperform, over time, outperform broadcast at every level. The quality of the conversation, the ease of use of how we produce it, the color space, resolution, audio, like all of those things. There's no reason why, like, we're very close to flanking them in every position, and that's and then we're making all of how we do it open to everybody, not by accident. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again with, are you using any IT automation tools like Puppet or Ansible to automate management of each node in the system?
Other than Apple Script.
I think that, yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah, we use Apple Script.
We use Apple Remote Desktop as well, and there's some management features that has. And I know JJ has some things on there for like booting and rebooting and things like that. But
how do we use Apple Script in the we use that to light up the Mac Minis, right? I mean, that's the.
Well, yeah. So the Black Siphon program, it sits on these Mac Minis, and what it does is it takes the siphon frames and it converts them. It does not convert them. It exposes them to the Blackmagic hardware. So that program,
the Siphon in itself can't see the Blackmagic hardware. You need Black Siphon.
Well,
to
Siphon,
see
it. The thing with, so yes, but the way that Siphon works is it's basically just telling another program where to find your video frame, whereas NDI and all those other transport technologies are copying the video frame and handing it to that application. So Siphon is wicked fast because it's just memory sharing. So what Black Siphon does is it exposes that memory sharing to the Blackmagic hardware so that it can see ZoomISO's video frame, right? So it's not that the video frame is being copied from ZoomISO, copied to Black Siphon, copied to the deck link. It's literally the deck link is reaching the frame that sits inside of ZoomISO's memory buffer and pulls it out the hardware on the other end. Now, Black Siphon, in order to configure that, you have to tell it which hardware output you want to be on and which siphon source you want to match. And the only way that program allows you to do it is by clicking it through a drop-down list. So what we did is we wrote an Apple script, and it's open sourced up on the GitHub, where it just goes through and it sets the resolution and the input number and all of that stuff for all of the siphon inputs on all the Macs at once. And it gets triggered by Osculator. So Osculator receives an OSC message from Isadora. It executes the Apple script on all of the different Macs. The Macs go through and configure Black Siphon at the end of the boot up chain. And that's how the inputs get into the constellation.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Has the development of Office Hours 2.0 led to any new features being rolled into Zoom OSC or ZoomISO that are of use in the wild?
Go ahead, Andy.
We'd use it a lot for stability testing. I mean, it's a great scale test of, having 20 of these contributions every single day. It's a great place for us to be able to test things. So I think with regard to the video engine inside of ZoomISO, the encoding engine and all of that, it's an opportunity for us to really refine that workflow. And it works two ways, right? In the one sense, it's an opportunity for me to apply bug fixes and come back. what it also is an opportunity for me to rest on this and say, hey, this occurs every single day. It's one of the highest end use cases, and it works fairly well. So it gives me confidence when I'm speaking to customers like, hey, I'm having this wacky issue. I don't really know what it is. It's like, well, it's probably something in the chain, because we've set up an ideal deployment of it. We test it every single day. It's running the same copy of the software that everybody else has. We have an understanding of now what can cause different things to happen and advise the customers accordingly. So it gives me a lot of confidence in the power of the product at that point.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, up next, and he says, "Is this setup using Universe Standard or Pro?"
Go ahead, Andy.
And I see, and I know that the question of the 30% off sale that's about to expire. I've gotten this question many times from people over the past week or so. So we're using Universe Standard right now. It gives you the ability to post the UI to the web controller. What the difference with regards to the web controller between Standard and Pro is the ability to upload your own custom CSS elements or inject your own code into the HTML. We're not currently utilizing that. We may expand to that in the future, but this would be for like designing your own button inside of the Universe controller, like going in and actually, and I don't mean branding, we can upload our own PNGs and all of that stuff and make those interactive, but actually using CSS to design and style our own control elements and then upload those to the web UI. That's where you'd start to need Universe Pro. But if you're looking to do sort of one-to-one with what we're doing today, Universe Standard will get you by. And I think for most of you, that's probably where you're going to want to go. It has enough connections to peripheral hardware. It has the web controller, which is the big flashy element that we're using with the Cloudflare tunnel. And then maybe you roll that for a bit and upgrade to Pro if you decide that you are going to get into some serious coding with the web UI.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, here on the panel. Would there be any advantages to panelists using the Zoom OSC client in Office Hours 2.0 rather than the vanilla Zoom client?
Go ahead, Andy.
I mean, if we did, we would have control of a whole bunch of different settings on the far end, which would be cool. But I also think it's an unnecessary requirement just because of the existing sort of methods that Office Hours already uses to sanitize the inputs as we come in. Like we already sort of have established the precedent of mic checks and ruthless reviews and things like that. And I think that this type of show will benefit less because of the type of people that are involved in it and the type of things they go through to get here than would Joe Consumer, who maybe it would be nice just to be able to directly control a bunch of those settings. But then again, you have you're trading control of their Zoom client for additional friction in getting them in, because they're going to have to install the program, log into it, and get in there. Again, it's not terrible, but it's just another thing. And I think that we have the advantage right now of like Alex was talking about earlier, being low impact on the Zoom meeting, right? It sits as a spectator to what is Office Hours 1.0 right now. And so we can continue to do this without any interruption to that process, without having to ask you guys really to do anything substantially different besides putting PIN numbers in your names and making sure your Makana info is up to date. So in terms of thinking about reducing the footprint and maximizing the impact, I think we're at a good ratio right now by using the vanilla Zoom client. But again, in the future, maybe there'll be a Zoom app or something that we can deploy that will start to help us standardize some of this stuff.
Yeah, and we hope to, we're looking pretty seriously at how we integrate some of the panelist information as well as other things into Zoom itself using the Zoom apps, so that we want to be able to build something so you're not jumping back and forth between things to make all of that work. So we're working on that right now. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, is our next questioner. He says, in looking towards Office Hours cloud production, will ZoomISO need to have modifications to the NDI feeds to label the outputs in some different way?
Go ahead, Andy.
So we actually do have the option now in ZoomISO to set your NDI prefix. So you can go in there and actually type in your own prefix that'll appear on the NDI feed if you want to use that for designation and identification purposes. So we have built out some of that already. I also know that we have customers right now who are using ZoomISO in the cloud on Mac 3 Metal instances and are having good success with it. So I think we're there in terms of what the main features are. But of course, as we see more adoption in the space, we'll continue to adjust as needed.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back with a dollars and cents question. If we had to pay $1,000 to $2,000 a month in costs for a 2.0 in the cloud, why not make the goal to co-locate the 2.0 hardware?
Go ahead, Andy.
I think a couple of things on that. I think we have done a really good job when building 2.0 about thinking about how things are modularly related to each other. For example, the Video Hub only does things that the video hub needs to do. It doesn't, we don't lean on it to do things that we can do inside of the constellation, right? So I've tried to compact as much functionality into as few pieces of hardware as possible, but then utilize each piece of hardware for its own specific purpose. So for example, if you wanted to deploy this without HDR, without 10-bit, all you do is remove the FS HDRs, and it doesn't harm any of the rest of the system, right? If you know that you don't need, you know, a 40 by 40 attached to a constellation, you could take the video hub out and not lose any essential functions related to the super sources or the smart gallery or any of that stuff, right? So it's been about thinking about making sure that each piece of hardware, while it's interconnected to the whole system, isn't pulling double duty to accommodate another piece of the system for reasons that would not be as beneficial as just keeping things modularly packed. When it comes to co-locating, I'll sort of leave it to the panel to discuss the pros and cons of that. But I think it sort of speaks for itself on that.
We are co-locating right now. Right. We're in a facility that has two independent 1 gig connections with 23 strands of dark fiber to 365 Main Street in San Francisco. So it's a pretty good location to have us have our servers right now. Yes, they're, you know, it's not as power resilient as some of the other locations, but I think we're already kind of going down that path, and trying to co-locate what we're doing right now would be challenging. I also think from all the stuff I've seen with software, I mean, again, we're waiting for that to all work out, but you know, there'll be a temptation to do a lot of this in a handful of computers, but what makes this work partially is FPGA-based systems that are only doing what they have to do and can do it every single time if you ask them to do it. It's not a computer that suddenly the CPU starts to get overloaded and it starts to drop frames or do things erratically or become less responsive. You know, those are all things that we have to we're going to have to test. It will take us, after we get this running, which I think Office Hours 2.0 will reach its potential probably sometime middle of next year. You know, we're going to get to a point where it's solely running the show, hopefully in January, but it will still take months of us tweaking it and building it. I think that by the summer of next year, it will look like a broadcast, like it will look as good as anything else out there. Then it'll take us another year to figure out how do we get this into a cloud formation, because because what it will be doing when it's at full capacity is not something that I know how to do in the cloud. Like, I just don't know how to do it. And I know it sounds superfluous to talk about HDR and surround, but for those of you who have those tools, who have an HDR screen and have surround, when we start doing playbacks of movie clips or other things that are in surround and in HDR, you know, it's going to be hard to go back, you know, to that. It's not the Zoom stuff. I mean, Zoom stuff looks marginally better than what it does. But when we start inserting content into the system and having example files and everything else, and for instance, I can finally do training in HDR and surround where you can actually hear it and see it. That's something that is distinct. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has the last one in the regular queue this morning, and it's once we
I think we got one more.
Oh, do we? Okay. Once we get isolated audio from each panelist, could we route the audio via MADI into a mix engine like an Allen and Heath D Live to enable people to mix the show remotely?
Go ahead, Andy.
I don't know that I'd start there. I'd start simple. I'd just plug them all into an X32 and then use the OSC controls in the X32 and then take the output of that. And we can spread them. We can do whatever we want and then throw that out into hardware and up to the cloud. Everybody will still get the same ability to remotely mix the show. We don't lose anything because the X32 has the ability to do that. It has the Dante connection. So if we decide that we're going to use Dante, you know, at the beginning, and then we're going to go embedded SDI when Zoom supports that in the future, maybe, then we have the flexibility to do both. I don't know that going through the whole MADI chain and then putting a mix engine in there and all of that is the simplest way to get the goal of the question, which was remote mixing of the show. We also get the benefit of exposing only the controls that we think we need. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I sometimes sit in front of a soundboard, get a little overwhelmed about too many choices, right? Whereas if we've looked at this show multiple times over and we know what the things and the dials and the adjustments are that make a substantial impact on Zoom audio production, we can cull down a whole lot of the unnecessary knobs and dials and buttons and focus the interface on really the things that matter for a panelist in a panel conversation for this type of show. We can specialize the interface to serve the needs that it has. And that's when I think about remote control, right? The Belfast method is sort of, at least in the way that it used to be, everybody would VPN in and then use the official software tools for those pieces of hardware to remote control them. the paradigm shift with Office Hours 2.0 is building the interface and not requiring your VPN to interact with that. Again, it gives you the simplicity of not needing to deploy the VPN, but it gives you the benefit of building exactly the control interface for exactly the people that you need running that show. You're building something very intentional versus just opening up the entire system to everybody on a VPN.
And it means that we can constantly evolve it. Like, we're not sitting there asking a developer for a button. We're constantly going, it'd be really good if we had a button for this, and then next day it's there, or the next week it's there, or whatever that is. And we can start to build multiple interfaces. So for instance, there may be a configuration that is, I only have one operator, and that's what that looks like. Or there's a configuration that says, it turns out we have 10 people today that are working on this, and everybody, we can spread that all out. And each one of those interfaces and how those look and what modes they work in and everything else can all be defined by us. We're not externalizing that control to other, to our technical partners who have, we know that we're an edge case. Like, we're pretty far out there. And I think that we have the opportunity to keep on evolving faster than the industry is capable of doing on its own. And we have been we've been very fortunate to have a lot of our partners, whether it's, Atem MixFX Pro, the folks at Universe, the folks at, Isadora, like all of those, we've been lots of people. Sal Segoyan helped us with the Apple script. We've had a lot of people that have been supporting us in, obviously, Liminal, to make adjustments to their software and to figure stuff out so that we can make this work. And also, of course, with all the computer graphics, I want to make sure to thank SPX and Tuomo, who's been doing not only helping us with improving the features and stability, but also working on the actual implementation of the graphics. And so those have all been, we've got a series of really committed partners that have been really helping us. And I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but it's been great so far. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, another couple have come in. If we could tie SPX into a translation engine and automate captioning, could we globalize 2.0 with multiple streams in multiple languages along with a translated Mukana?
Go ahead, Dennis.
I don't think so. The biggest part would be getting interpreters so that you were actually getting what people were saying in other languages. That would... that would be the most important thing. Captioning obviously would be nice to have, but until the people watching can understand what you're saying, that's not really going to help.
It's probably, we definitely want to do that at some point. It's probably, we have a lot of things that we have to get fixed before we probably add that. To Dennis's point, there's a lot of automated captioning. Google has some great engines for that and so on and so forth that could grab it. You would get the gist, but because our discussion is so technical, there's a high probability that the auto captioning will have very high error rate because of the fact that we're talking about things that are not in its normal vocabulary. So those are things that are going to be a challenge, and I think that we're probably not going to tackle them immediately as we go down the path. Tackling English may happen a little earlier, but right now we're going to probably stick with what we have just because that's an accessibility feature that's actually harder than it looks. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, when I mixed the last Belfast show, I needed to use the X32 edit to apply specific EQ to the vocal and guitar. Wouldn't that be advantageous to compensate for specific audio issues in a specific panelist or host?
Go ahead, Andy.
Again, you build the interface for the show that you're doing, right? So in a situation where you have guitar and vocals that need to mix together with those types of effects, then yes, expose those to your Universe UI. I don't know the last time we had somebody playing guitar on Office Hours. I don't necessarily know that we need to do that here. But the point stands. I think that the X32 edit is basically saying, here's the entire board, right? And it's handing that over to somebody, and they have to be VPN'd, and they have to do that.
And they have to know how an X32 works.
Right, and they have to know how it works, which, again, maybe in this community, we'd have a generally better than average understanding of how to do something like that. But I think the idea of, would I want that, or would I want to, as a team, get together and think about what controls do we actually need for this show, and then line them all up vertically in a bunch of bars for each panelist, and then have the ability to interact with that. I don't think, because again, X32 edit almost presumes that you understand how to operate an X32 soundboard, right? And Universe, you build exactly what you need to know, and you understand those buttons and dials and the impact that they have, and the community comes together and decides what the impact of those things should be, and do we have everything that's necessary to do what we normally need to do in the normal course of our operation. And then, yeah, if we bring a guitar again and you know, whatever, then we spin up X32 Edit, or we spin up a master control interface that we made where we have that. But I think that it's sort of like using a cannon to hit a fruit fly. You know, there's a more direct approach.
Well, and the goal for us is that Office Hours 2.0 is not a how do we do this, it's how does everybody do this, and how do we get to a point where we're able to let people build interfaces. I think that this is a superior future than a StreamYard kind of solution, which is we're going to box everybody in to a solution that we think makes sense for the most people. But it's going to be always kind of a lowest common denominator. This is what we think people need, and you're always going to be kind of contained, you know, inside of that system, whether it's Zoom events or StreamYard or Restream or whatever. They can't make edge cases. They can't give us those customer controls. What I think is a possibility, whether it's production in the cloud, which we see in the Mobley process, you know, the Belfast method, what we're doing in Office Hours 2.0, what we're going to be doing with the cooking shows, all of those things are us experimenting with a bespoke solution that over time becomes easier and easier to develop. So right now, you know, Andy is writing Andy's JavaScript, and we're in Isadora and putting those things together. There's going to be some point where we go, oh, we need the audio module, and you add it. And oh, we need this module, and you add that. And then you build, you know, you can very quickly rough out an interface. And this is a multi-year idea where we figure a lot of this out over this year. Sometime this year, we start making it available more and more. All of you are just running off with it because we're putting it up on GitHub. So the idea is that all of you are running off and innovating in your own place. We're all learning from each other. But the idea is that a client at some point, possibly many clients, there's going to be a point where the idea of going back to hybrid or physical events will collapse. We're very close to that. Like it's just a little rickety bridge that everyone keeps walking across, and they all know that the strings are getting pretty thin because we're just going to give up. Because the thing is that it doesn't mean there won't be any physical events, but there probably won't be very many hybrid events because they're not a good idea. And so as that happens, there's going to be an explosion. As that collapse happens, there's going to be an explosion of digital events. But those digital events are going to be done by event companies that want something specific. How do we make ours different? How do we make it interesting and compelling? And what we're able to do in a way that you can't when you brush it with the same brush is that you can design it however you want for that show and for the users that are going to use it. So a client can sit there and go, I really want a button over here. And what they're going to do is hire members of this community. If we all get good at the people who work on Office Hours 2.0 and the Belfast method and are going to build up this knowledge base that allows them to eventually become the interface designer or the logic designer for custom ideas. And again, if you're doing one show every year, you'll probably use the most off the shelf. But you have to remember that the budget for Dreamforce, for Salesforce's little thing, is over $50 million. Or it was over $50 million. Like it wasn't like a $10, event, and I'm being conservative there. The numbers are higher than that. The issue there is that, they have money to spend $100,000 with someone to build an interface to make that show go well, or $200,000 or $500,000 to have a team put together the perfect way to put this together, and so that all the buttons are where we want them and everything else. And so you just have to remember that for really big events, there's money there to make that customized, and for little events, I'm going to do something, a weekly show or a monthly show. It's worth spending $10,000 for someone to spend a week working on it, or 2 weeks working on it, or whatever that is. So I really feel like there is a real opportunity to build business among our community. I'm not, it's that people can be solving this problem for, and we're not controlling it. You're not licensing it from us. We're putting it up on GitHub. Go do it yourself. And so we'll, and so the idea is that any of us can build business around that idea, and without owing anybody anything. And so I think that's a real opportunity that I'm hoping that we keep on pushing down that path, is because I believe it's a revolution. It's a revolution in conversation. Because this is a different kind of show that we're bringing up than what you see otherwise. Next question.
The last one in here for today, Alfredo Tigolo, it looks like, in Inglewood, California, says, does Andy have an apprenticeship program?
Go ahead, Andy.
It's called office hours. Yeah, it's a that literally it's what it is. I mean, in the sense that we're working together. And again, I don't see it so much as like a master and apprentice sort of relationship. It's funny, December 2nd, 2020 was the first time I showed up on office hours. So it's exactly 1 year ago that we first connected for the first time. And it's been really interesting to see a year later kind of where we're at. And I've learned a ton from this community. And I hope that we've introduced, some things that have been helpful both through the stuff that we make and introducing Isadora to you guys, and then some of the people that come along with that journey that have been sort of stalwarts now of the community. That's been really exciting to see. But I do truly view that we do it together. And I think, Alex, to your last point, I don't necessarily even think it's the future. I've already seen, I meant to share it with you the other day, a job posting from a production company looking for somebody with Isadora experience to make a custom UI for a project. Like they're already, in order to get certain jobs now, you already have to start to build up some of the skills that we've been pioneering in this community, I think. So it's already begun. Like there's, and we saw that a lot with ZoomOSC as well. People looking for people who could build companion interfaces for people that allowed them to switch their Zoom shows. That was a business, that the people actually made quite a bit of money doing that type of work. And that's why I'm excited too, as we start to build up more knowledge about Isadora and Universe, that somebody here could begin a business model at your company that was designing interfaces for your clients, that you'll understand now the tools and services necessary to do that. We've certainly seen that be a profitable model for us, and we're trying to show how we did it for the past year and a half so that everybody else can partake in how we did all of that work and share that, and then begin to use that for these jobs that are starting to crop up that are requiring it. So it's been really exciting. But yeah, we definitely do it as a full team in a community, and it's all based on this group, and this is where we pour everything into.
And you want to look at all the things that we're doing, whether it's jumping on with helping with graphics with Office Hours 2.0. As we roll out Office Hours 2.0, you're going to be us inviting you to our own apprenticeship program, which is working on the show. But in the beginning, Office Hours 2.0 will be something that anybody who raises their hand and wants to apprentice can be part of. 6 months from now, you'll work on a bunch of the smaller shows that we do before we let you actually touch Office Hours 2.0. So there's a real opportunity right now to jump in and become part of that and be in a place where it's okay to fail. Over time, though, it'll be like, oh, you got to work on some of these smaller Saturday projects or something else, because we can't have you work on the big show until you've been trained. But the goal there again is that people learn how to do these things, so that when a big company comes to any one of us, whether it's John Preto or myself or anybody else, Rupert might have a show that he has to do, that we all know a bunch of other people that have, like, what we're doing right now is unique to us. Like there's a company that's looking for that now with Isadora, but the knowledge base is going to be unique to this community. And so when someone in this community gets a job, George gets a job that comes up, he's not going to know anybody else that knows how to build the interface in Universe outside of this community, or Doug's going to have a sports thing where he wants to build some kind of interface for the client or whatever. There's not going to be anybody else to go to. So we need to, at first, we need to build that knowledge into the community, and working on these shows allows you to slowly and safely figure out how it all works, and also for other people to get to know you. Like, that's a person that I can trust to be on time or get things done or build these things, and that they'll just learn how to do it. So it's a real opportunity right now to be involved. And so I would highly recommend it. The next round of emails for that program are going to go out next week. So I was a little behind, but I now have it all kind of sorted out. I first had to push the horizon of events of our second hours away. So I scheduled 2 months of that. So we're scheduled out. We might move a couple things, but we're scheduled out 2 months for second hours. And then you saw that one of the responses of that, because you saw next week is now going out every week, and that'll happen each week. You'll have 2 weeks of it in advance. So that's all happening right now. The next step is starting to roll, giving people opportunity to take more and more roles within what we're doing. And so that's going to be coming out. That'll be another questionnaire. I know we already asked one, but we're gonna have another one of exactly what are you interested in doing, so that we can start building teams around that process. So stay tuned for that. And Andy, thanks for hanging out with us and talking through the stuff. And thanks to the producers who are asking great questions and being part of that part of this conversation. And thank you, of course, to the panelists who show up every day and share your knowledge. We really appreciate it. All right. Tomorrow we're going to talk about how to get the most out of this little mess. So stay tuned. And remember, cooking on Sunday instead of on Saturday. We've just added that, so I just want to make sure you knew. And yeah. Oh, last little thing. for many people, I use Affinity all the time, Affinity Photo, and it's really cheap right now. So you know,
really cheap.
Yeah, really cheap right now. So it's good stuff. I almost tweeted it out, and I was like, a tweet might be too much, but I mentioned it at the end of the show. Okay. All right. Anyway, that's it. We'll see you in after hours.